you so much for everyone who could make it today. We are super excited to have Farnoosh here today. For those of you who don't know me, I am Jennifer Weber, the head of financial planning at Weber Asset Management and a certified financial planner. I talk to our clients all the time about financial goals and how to achieve those goals. But we all know that managing money is more than just you're managing your dollars and cents. There's so much more to it. And a lot of that comes from your mindset, your behaviors, and your discipline. And that's why Farnoosh is here today with us to talk about how to deal with that. In her upcoming book, A Healthy State of Panic, she talks about managing those fears to live your best financial life. For those of you who don't know Farnoosh, she is a personal finance expert, the host of the So Money podcast, which has over 30 million downloads and one of my favorites. She's also a contributor in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and Time Magazine, and you might have seen her on the Today Show or Good Morning America. So Farnoosh, welcome, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. You forgot to add Weber Asset Management to my list of where you might see her. I am here. I am excited. And as you were speaking about working in your field for so long, I'm like, well, you're probably also a fear expert, Jennifer, because what is that's what I've come to this conclusion of, that the emotional underpinning of so many of our financial questions and curiosities is fear. You know, money's emotional, and often the emotion that we might think to dismiss because it's not cool to be afraid is fear. So excited to talk to you a little bit about that concept. And yeah.
No, that's so true, because people all the time comes up to me and start telling me what their fears are around money, more than they do about their goals for their money, but it's normally what they're scared of and what they're afraid of happening.
Well, and I think there's, I think there's a lot of opportunity in that. And I think that's the thing that I want to rebrand about fear, is that there's no shame in fear, just opportunity in many cases, especially in our financial lives, if we're willing to sit with it for even just a little bit and ask it questions and get to some answers. That I think when you reflect on your fears, you're really reflecting on your goals and what you want to protect. And it's deeply personal. So it's worth the effort.
Right. It is so personal. I mean, money is such a big part of our lives, and something that people hesitate to talk about because there's so many deep-rooted issues, which I'm excited to talk about more. So tell us more about you. I gave, the big picture overview, but I know with your background, you were 22, you were in debt, and now you're one of the leading personal finance experts. So can you talk to us a little bit about that journey?
Yes, I'm happy to. Well, I would say the journey started even before I was 22, growing up in a family where my parents immigrated from Iran in the late 70s and raised me in Worcester, Massachusetts, where my dad was getting schooled and my mom didn't speak English. And she and I were I was like an appendage on her body, didn't leave her sight for the first 6 years of my life before I started going to full-time school. And I think those beginnings were for a lot of us, that childhood that we have is foundational to ultimately how we grow up and see the world and what our fears end up being. And my parents, we are Middle Eastern, so we talk about money a lot, but that's not to assume that we are perfect in any realm when it comes to managing money. We have our own host of complexities and issues and myths that we perpetuate around money. But I will credit the upbringing insofar as it gave me fluency in finance. It gave me not a fear so much of talking about money. There were other fears about money, but talking about it wasn't a fear of mine. And I recognized that when I went to college and I actually studied finance, and would look around me and look at my friends and the culture and go, we are okay to talk about things like Wall Street and the market and these sort of bigger abstract things and rich and wealth. But when it comes to our money and personal stuff, it's a dead end. Nobody wants to talk about money. So there was this it was odd. And so, being a curious person always naturally my entire life, I think I married that I paired that curiosity with the world of finance, but I really wanted just to go deeper and tell stories. And having that fluency with money enabled me to sort of have a jump start in the field. But again, like you pointed out, I had my own personal financial struggles. I had student loan debt and credit card debt. I was living in New York City making $18 an hour before taxes and trying to somehow make ends meet. I had support from my parents to some extent, but by and large, I was like on my own and trying to do the things. And how I did it was I worked a lot. I worked outside of my full-time job. I had side hustles. I pet sat, I bird sat, I kid sat. I like did all the things. I wrote articles to supplement my, full-time salary. And I got a book deal in my mid 20s, which helped me immensely get a head start, paid off all of the remaining student loans, and, started to climb out of it. And I think that, again, I was like really lucky. I got to work in personal finance. So I had access to all these smart people and the latest tools and trends to help myself as I was helping my readers and my audience. I was helping myself too. It was this sort of beautiful cycle of like Farnoosh needs help. So she's going to research the thing to help herself, but naturally also help a lot of other people. And so that was it. And I think that a big catalyzing moment for me, to be honest, was getting laid off in the Great Recession of 2009. I talk about that in the book, how it was this obviously scary time, but probably with all scary things, there's opportunity, right? And getting laid off was terrifying in the sense that, like, with anybody who gets laid off, like, you're like, well, what's next, and what does this mean about my capabilities? And will this be a wound that I have to then carry into the job market to try to look for another job? And my identity was so wrapped up in my title and my job and all of that. So that was really hard to reckon with. But what I also realized that, that fear of, maybe not finding the next right thing led me to create that next right thing on my own. Like, yes, it's scary. Things might not happen. But when I have found in those scary moments, my job is not to dwell on what I can't control, but rather what I can control, which is that, I may not have a job title anymore. I may not have a salary and health benefits, but I still have an education. I still have resources. I still have a network. And most importantly, I have ambition. So those things was a perfect cocktail. And it led me to, within months, start my own business as now we call them, content creator, thought leader. I don't really consider myself, I guess I can influence people. I'm still trying to influence my kids. It's not happening. Like, the most important people I want to influence, it's just not happening. But yeah, I think that for me, fear has really, particularly my like later adult years, has really shown up for me, but it's because I've made a choice to see fear and those fearful moments as opportunities to stop and go, okay, fear, here you are again, because fear doesn't go away. It doesn't like to go away. And say, what do you want me to know? What do you want me to protect? And also, who brought you here? Right? Because that's an important question too. Sometimes fear is not sourced correctly, and we need to get to the root of it sometimes to figure out whether we should actually pay attention to it or not.
Right. I love that, because we all go through that in life. Different things happen to us, and it does lead to opportunities. So, kind of flipping that script, instead of harping on the negative, how can we make that situation better?
Yeah. I mean, I say, I'm all about making personal finance accessible and equitable, and fear is an accessible and equitable resource. Like, we all have it. It's just a choice of how we're going to use it. It's a resource like anything else. And I think that we're ready for this conversation in our culture, where I think for many years, and I would say during the 90s and the 2000s, it was like happiness, happiness, happiness. Be happy, do happy, happiness, all the books, the happiness cottage industry. And look, I want to be happy. And I think I am a happy person most days, but I also think you can be happy and feel all the other feelings like sadness and grief and fear and pain. And, that I don't think that we have to live in this um, world where it's one or the other. I think you can be afraid and fulfilled. I think you can be scared and smart and successful. I don't think that they cancel each other out. And I think we're so ready for that recognition and that address, because that's what's true. And I think for those of us who struggle with fear, part of it is because we feel like it's not the right thing to feel.
Right.
Right. We feel like it's saying something about our weaknesses, as opposed to, hey, I'm a human. Like, last I checked, the world's a scary place, y'all. Like, it's scary out there. Okay. Like, I don't want to diminish the problems of the world. So, like, I'm living life. I think everyone else is too. We can all say, like, we're all living life. So, if we can all accept that fear is a natural sort of part of life, then I think that's a great baseline. And then from there, it's like, well, what's the opportunity? What are we going to do about it? Because again, like I said, fear doesn't just like go away. And those of us who can be absolutely fearless all the time, what does that even mean? That means that you're not taking into consideration or don't care about consequences, risks, and affordability. Few people can get to that promised land, and some are, but like, we probably can't be friends. Like, we're not going on vacation together, me and you. So I want people to sort of relax about fear and know that it can be opportunistic.
Well, why do you think money is so challenging, and what are we afraid about when it comes to money?
So many things. It's like it has its own chapter in the book. And of course, so many stories too sprinkled throughout that I couldn't help but like give an example about, that like fear of loneliness. Oh, but money too. Fear of rejection. Oh, but there was that time with money where I faced rejection. Like, money is, you can't escape it. But I think in our culture, we don't talk about it enough. It is taboo. And anything taboo has a layer of fear to it. Anything that is an unknown or is a mystery to us scares us, right? It's like when we have the knowledge is when we feel empowered and we feel like we can lay down the fears. But by and large, a lot of people are afraid of money because they're not educated and they think that perhaps it's not their territory. I know like a lot of women I've interviewed feel that way. They grew up not seeing other women dominate in the world of finance or even be the breadwinners in their relationships, or even be in the room where the decisions are made about things in their household around retirement and insurance and high stakes things like big purchases. And so I think that is one of the reasons. It's not the only reason, but I think it's like the obvious foundational reason why money is fearful to us, because we don't have a culture that invites the conversation in. And it goes back to what I was saying earlier about like the one fear that I don't have about money is that if I talk about it, bad things will happen. I don't have that fear because I saw my parents talk about, I saw them argue about money. And so they talked about it and bad things happened. But I think what they showed me, which was important, was that when they did fight, there was resolution. Maybe not right away. There were periods of silence, but then they would like come together. And I also saw my mother like go out and try to make money because the conversations were not ending well. And so she took it upon herself to go, okay, I'm going to go out there and make my own money so that I can have agency. I can have more decision-making control in my financial life. So that's one reason. I think too, that the culture perpetuates a lot of myths about money that are scary. For example, if you're rich, you're not a nice person. If you're poor, you're not, there's also like sort of like myths about what we think of like poor people and rich people. And we sort of like, we compartmentalize people. We polarize. There's a lot of polarization in the world of wealth where it's like the haves and the have-nots. Even just the way we speak, the language that we use can feel really frightful, because you're like, am I that person? And where do I fall? And that's a scary calculus. And money is high stakes stuff. Like as I say in the book, when we're talking about money, we're talking about life. When we're talking about where to bank, how to invest, whether or not to, get married, not get married, have kids, what to afford, what a house to buy. Like these are huge decisions that have a lot of consequence, and that weight can be scary for a lot of us. And we don't want to make mistakes with money, because then again, the consequences can be very real and severe. So I think, for example, fear with investing is one where if we don't really examine it, it can just drive us into a wall, right? Like a lot of us are afraid of investing. So what happens? We don't do it, or we don't trust and the way. And so we get in there and we get really messy with it. And like we start and then we stop and then we trade and we do this and then we go into crypto, and also those, like, we follow like shiny objects. Like we don't even know. We're so overwhelmed with fear that we don't trust, like, hey, maybe if I just like invest and let it be and, go back to like living life, like the money will do its thing. I think the better way to assess fear in those moments of like, should I invest? Should I not invest? If I invest, oh my gosh, what if I lose money? I always say, like, there's a bigger fear you're not considering, which is that if you don't do the thing, if you let your fear just paralyze you, there's a even scarier thing waiting for you 10, 20 years from now, which is that you will arrive in retirement without money. And then you might have to ask your kids for some money. And I think that's more terrifying.
That is
You
what I
know?
talk to my clients about. Some of them are like, I got to save for college tuition. This is like my big goal. And I'm like, okay, but you also need to save for your retirement. It's not just about opening the 529 plans, because you don't want your kids to come to you, or you don't want to go to your kids and be like, I need a place to live. I need to move in with you. It's all
Yeah.
about saving for your own future as well.
Yeah, it is. And I think that's, you've been subconsciously or maybe consciously like using fear as a tool in your meetings, like in a gentle way. And that's the thing too. Fear doesn't have to be this like big, scary, like it doesn't have to, it's not this self-fulfilling prophecy. Like fear, it's just been branded like this 4-letter word. It's this big, ugly monster in our culture. And I think, I feel like, can we just give fear a chance? Like it has helped us get so far in life, in the world. Like, thankfully, fear has been around before you and I. We wouldn't be here. We would have been like, our ancestors would have been swallowed by woolly mammoths. Like, we have made it thanks to fear. So let's just like relax a little bit and give fear a little bit more street cred.
Yeah, I love that. I do want to point out to everyone on this a webinar that you will be receiving, or the first 75 registrants. Yep, a copy
Thank
of A
you for
Healthy State of
supporting.
Panic. So we will be sending that out, and then I'm going to ask a couple more questions, and we will open it up to Q&A as well. So just to let everybody know. Well, on these topics of fear, right now we have great data coming out about inflation and job reports, but at the same time, a lot of conversations with clients are regarding inflation, recession, job loss, all of it. And so there is so much fear about that. And then what should I do? How do you approach that with people when they see these headlines? And I think that's what's happening a lot, is just like these big headlines, because news can be so fear driven.
Yes. And it profits from fear. I think that, and I read about this in the book, because we all have these, as I call them, like these big, ugly, these big sort of abstract fears, the R word, inflation. And I think what the response, sort of the emotionally intelligent thing to do there, when you find yourself kind of spiraling, like perfect example is like when Silicon Valley Bank, had a scare there and was acquired, but like people were like, oh, what if my bank collapses? And, I always say, when there's this sort of like big abstract fear, you got to bring it to your doorstep. Like, you're worried about a recession. Okay, let's paint the very specific like picture. When I say bring it to your doorstep, I mean, bring it into your home, bring it into your life. Like, if a recession actually is here, or we're living it, and as a result, you lose your job, which is one of the big things that happens in recessions. One of the things that this feels very universal in a recession is a lot of times people get their work cut back, they get furloughed, they get laid off, is to go, what would I do if I got laid off today? or tomorrow. Like give yourself 24 hours, because then I think you are more likely to do something about it, right? Like if you, it's like, go to the edge, bring it home, bring it here. Like imagine it's happened. Don't think, what if someday? Think, what if now? And so for me in those moments, I don't know about you, but I would be more likely to go and like start some research, like what do I actually have in the bank that will sustain me for how long of a time? What are some expenses that I could immediately cut? I'm not saying do it right away, but you want to have that, like you want to have your go bag, right? Could you look into your state's unemployment insurance benefits? Could you like investigate at work and find out what is like historically the severance at your job? Is it maybe even in your contract what your severance could be? And that, again, it's more for like creating certainty in this uncertainty, but making it very specific to you, because otherwise being worried about a recession, or like case in point with me, I'm worried about climate change, like all of us. And I live in an area in New Jersey where, I feel like it's been raining like so much. And the rain a couple of seasons ago, a couple of years ago, we had a really bad storm that devastated a lot of homes in our neighborhood. Fortunately, we were mostly okay, but it got me thinking, like, what if another disaster comes to us? Like, it's one of those fears that can really like wash you over, because you're like, no pun intended, but it can really like, just like make you go, like put your hands up in the air and go, well, I guess that's like the world's ending. But no, if actually a flood came into my house, what would I do tomorrow? Right. I would get flood insurance like ASAP and do all the things, because that's what's within my control. And when you have the fear of financial and like a financial thing like that, it's often coupled with other fears, because within that fear of the recession or job loss or inflation is also a hint of of the fear of uncertainty, which is its own thing, but sometimes the fear of money and the fear of uncertainty like to buddy up. Uncertainty and money go hand in hand. And so with uncertainty, I take like sort of my tips from that chapter, which is that when you fear uncertainty, what your body and your mind is asking you to protect is what is certain. Like that is what you're missing. That is that feeling that you're missing. And that's what you want to bring back and protect. So how do you create like calm in the chaos for yourself? How do you create that certainty? And believe it or not, throwing money at problems is not always a solution. Is sometimes, and I think that's like great news, because we don't all have all the money. But I talk about how for me in times of uncertainty pertaining to like financial life choices and stuff, it's about my network. It's about tapping into my resources, like my skills, my resilience, my colleagues, my neighbors, right? Which is as rich, if not more rich than the dollars in your bank account. And being more thoughtful about how I use other resources besides just my money, but like my time and my energy, to get closer to a place where I feel more secure. There's nothing wrong with wanting to feel secure. I just want to say that out loud, because I think we also live in a culture that's like, get outside your comfort zone. Uncertainty is the key to life. And yes, uncertainty is the only certainty in life. We have to get comfortable with it. But I'd be lying if I said I don't prefer like knowing what is coming at me versus like walking into like a complete question mark of a life. I think that we work really hard and we owe it to ourselves to create some stability in our lives. And of course, we can't control everything, which is why I tell my kids that they always not just need a plan B, but a plan C, D, E, and F. And for them, it's not because like, they're worried about losing their jobs. They're 9 and 6, but it's like when they expect something to happen, like a plan on a weekend or going into a store and getting a birthday toy that they really want. What if they don't have it? What if it's not in stock? What if the thing you ordered online is out of, gets lost in the mail? What if, the thing you were hoping to do at camp, it rains and you can't do that? Like, not only have these backup plans, but have exciting backup plans, like the ones you're really looking forward to. Like you could take A or B, part of you kind of wants the A, but like B would be great too. And
Yeah.
I don't think life has to be so black or white. I don't think it has to be all or nothing. Like there are a lot of other options we can pursue that we could be happy with. But it does take a little bit of like figuring that out and sitting down with yourself and figuring it out.
I'm going to open it up to questions shortly, but I think another fear often is so around money, we talk about, having your emergency savings available. So if something happens, we have that 3 to 6 months of living expenses. We even say a little more right now, 6 to 12, depending on your situation, available. So if there is uncertainty or something unexpected happens, you have that security. It's there for you.
It's great.
And
Yes.
then,
I mean, yeah.
and then there's also the fear of just generally investing, I think. Especially with some people that have a large windfall. It could be that, their spouse or significant other passed away and they've inherited money, or they're just new to investing. We have a lot of our younger clients who, starting to sell some stock options and they have this money to invest, but they're scared. And the thought is, is it the right time? What do we do? I mean, what do you say to those people, the newer or novice investors?
Yeah. I mean, I think I always like to ask fear questions. Like, firstly, especially when it's a financial fear, like how did you arrive at this fear, or how did this fear arrive in your life? What is the source? If you're someone who thinks like, I can't invest because I'll lose all my money, maybe it is because you we saw a family member, a lot of us, maybe we saw parents in the recession. So we said like the 401k became the 201k, and so those are real experiences, and not to undermine them or say, oh, well, that didn't happen, but those things happened. And those are things that are hard to unsee. But I think that, again, especially with matters of money and investing, there's a lot of assumptions. There are a lot of many fears are rooted in just false assumptions. And even in just discovering that is a great thing, because you will then you'll be closer to the truth when you kind of like agree that, okay, everybody can do this. As soon as you're afraid of something doing with money, first step should be like, why is that true? Why do I think that's true? Go and pursue that, because you'll learn so much. You'll learn so much about why you arrived at that fear, which then tells you a lot about how you've been internalizing a lot of your life's experiences. But it could also lead you to a place where it's like, no, that actually doesn't have to continue to be true, because I'm an adult now and I have resources and I have agency, and that's not my life. That was someone else's life. So it affects us, but it doesn't have to affect us forever. And I think that's a grown-up thing that we all have to just like lock arms together in and be like, okay, we have to agree that is where we're going to live our lives. We're not going to be like perpetuating a myth. But I always say with investing, education is like so empowering to know, for example, as a woman, even though you might be afraid of investing because, oh my gosh, what if I lose money? Did you know that more women are better at investing than men? Like the studies have come out, multiples of them from various sources. And so the verdict is out, like, because, and why? Funny enough, it's because, it's not because, we thought we were bad at investing because we weren't as aggressive as men. But the aggressiveness is actually what gets investors in trouble. It's that restlessness to not trust letting the investment grow on its own over time, that passive approach to investing. As we know, like now we know this is sort of the tried and true way of growing your wealth. It's this, when you get in there and you start day trading and getting messy and like, acting on impulse as opposed to like writing it out, which women, not to genderize, but the studies that have looked at the genders and their differences, this is what it boils down to, is that women are a little bit more passive, and they're well researched, and yes, they've assessed risk, and yes, they might be afraid, but they're doing it anyway, and they're not acting on the impulses as investors, and it benefits them. So finding these things out, sometimes the truth will like rewrite your narrative around money and rewrite your fear-based narratives around money. And as I say too, with fear of money and like with investing, there's always something scarier that maybe you're not considering that is actually the healthier fear to focus on. So if you're just afraid of investing, I don't think that's like a good enough fear. I want you to get even like painted like an even uglier picture of like, oh, like, okay, now you're afraid because like some days you'll lose money and, you know, it's inconsistent and you don't like uncertainty. I get that. That's the nature of investing. But what's scarier is if you don't participate, like we talked about, and then you land decade from now, 15, 20 years from now, with actually less money than you started because of inflation. And so, and that's motivating to me, like to know that, oh my God, if I don't, that my inaction is costing me money, that the inaction that I have been led to because of my fear right now is going to lead me to an even scarier place. Like, go to that scarier place. Let's all just go there. It's like, I call it the worst, like go to the worst case what ifs, because not because I like to torture people, but because I actually think this is the place where you will be catalyzed to actually make a healthy move. It's not where you're kind of like stuck in the abstract or stuck in like these sort of like surface scary stuff, but like get deep into it. I mean, there was a time when in 2020, I was like, the stock market is very terrifying right now. It was like March, April, and I just bought a home. It's, you know, I've talked about this in a lot of my work. I earn more than my husband in our marriage. It's been the source of many books and articles and things like that. And we have 2 kids, and I was like, will I be so thrilled if I wake up in 10 years and realize, like, if this market continues the way that it has been, like, I could just like lose 10 years worth of gains, you know, and a lot of us did, but, we also will make up for it. Like, I had my rational brain was like, just relax, go back to bed. But then I was like, I can't get rid of this fear. I don't know what to do with it. So I'm just going to like start educating myself on things because maybe I'm missing something. So I went into my portfolio and realized that I was highly over indexed in stocks. I was like 90% in stocks. I'm a 40-something-year-old woman with a mortgage and kids, and I'm the breadwinner and I run a business. So there's like a lot of risk there, you know, like, do I want to also play it, like roll the dice in my portfolio that much? I recognize that, you know, for whatever reason, maybe my auto rebalance wasn't on, or not, it wasn't even auto rebalance. Like, you have to adjust your portfolio for age risk, you know, and all that. And I had started this portfolio in my 20s when maybe 90% was fine and I had no responsibilities. I was like, I'm not comfortable with that. And so I didn't abandon the market, but I dialed back my stake in stocks to something that felt a little bit more aligned with where I was risk-wise in my life. And that's just like an intelligent investor thing to do. But the fear was like nudging me towards that. Like, I did see large declines in my portfolio and it was terrifying. And lo and behold, it's because a lot of my money, if not all of it, was in stocks when I could have probably afforded to be more taking on more bonds. And I talked to financial planners before I did this. Like, it wasn't just like a shot in the dark. I made sure like I wasn't, again, what do I not know? That's my job. When fear shows up, what am I missing? You know, there's something, I think that the more this gets better with age, but your instincts are worth listening to. And your instincts don't always come with all the answers, but it's that gnawing feeling that like, go out there and learn something, go out, ask questions, explore, investigate, look under the hood. And that's what I did. And I came to like, I think a resolution that felt really good, that I used that fear to make a healthy decision. It didn't derail my financial plan. And here's what else I did. You'll be proud of me. Because I recognized that I was reducing my stake in the stock market, you know, I went to like, you know, something more like 75% to 25, you know, from 90 to 75%. I recognized like, this will slow down my growth, you know, over the long run, like less risk, less return. So I contribute more to my portfolio every month in cash to make up for that so that I can at least arrive at retirement. Now, it's no promise, uncertainty is still a huge part of this, but that like at least where the calculators say I will land in a place that's still where I would have if I had just like stayed the course with my 90% exposure to the market, contributing what I was prior to that. So yeah, I think we cling to these like tried and true pieces of advice in the personal finance space. Like people almost had a heart attack when I said I leased a car. They were like, well, what did you do? Like you leased a car and you didn't buy a used car and drive it into the ground and pay cash. And I'm like, no, because I'm not my grandfather. You know what I mean? Like also it's like the industry's changing. They don't build cars to last anymore. And also like I can afford it. So can we move on? You know?
Right.
But I think that sometimes we're afraid of doing things because the rules say, and it's like, but wait a minute, maybe, you know, we should give ourselves more grace and say like, okay, what do you want to protect rather than, you know, if it's less about protecting the rule, but more about protecting what you want to protect, which might be your money, which I get, but there are other ways to do that besides following the old rules. You can do it other ways. We've advanced, you know, as a society and as a financial world.
I think I love what you said, because we talk to clients all the time about risk and portfolio and how much risk should we take on. And it's a lot about, well, there's a textbook answer of what we think, what we should do, or how much risk you should take on in terms of stocks and bonds. However, it also matters how well you can sleep at night.
Yes.
So that is so important. And the fear of loss is so much greater than that fear of, you know, there's no fear of gain. Of course,
Banker's fallacy. Yeah. Yeah. I read about that too. It's so true.
So that's really important when you're investing.
It is. It is.
I'm going to open it up and see if we have any questions for the last few minutes. Feel free to pop it into the chat and I will get that. I know one of the questions that we've gotten isn't just about investing, but it's about this fear of, you know, and I have this one, like raising spoiled kids, because that's like something I just do not want to happen. And how do you think about that and talk to them about money with your kids?
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I try to find all the opportunities. My son the other day at dinner was like, are we rich? Which is not because we were eating like a candlelit dinner, like we were in a fancy restaurant. I think, you know, that's a normal thing to be curious about at age 9 when you're socializing and you're going over other kids' houses and you're comparing and you're also watching movies. And he's on this like DuckTales trend, like he loves DuckTales and like Scrooge McDuck, the uncle, and how he swims in his money. And he was like, I said, well, what are you curious about? Like, what is fueling the question? Like, why do you want to know if we're rich? I always think that's a first good question to ask, like poke at the curiosity, because sometimes as a parent on the receiving end of that question, that's a terrifying question. Like, oh my God, this is like, there's so much weight on you to like try to give the perfect answer and not screw this kid up. But don't know that like you have an opportunity here to like throw your own question into the mix, you know, like answer with a question. And that's why I did. And I think it was because he in his mind was trying to figure out where we fit, you know, and he was looking for maybe a sense of like, are we okay? Are we secure? And I said to him, he goes, because, you know, I see like there's Elon Musk, who's a billionaire, and then there's homeless people. And then I guess we're just somewhere in the middle. And I was like, well, there's a really, really big middle. And there are a lot of ways that people choose to live their lives and use their money. And I didn't want to get into like the pay gap and all the other things yet. Like this wasn't going to become like, you know, a philosophical conversation, but it was like, I used this opportunity to pivot and give him the tools and the information that I felt like was age appropriate at that moment. And it may not have even been a satisfying answer as far as he was concerned, but I was like, here's what I'm ready to tell you. And I think that, what I told him was, and then I'll give you the takeaway for everybody. What I told him was essentially, look, I gave him facts. I didn't like dance around things. I was just like, I want to just give this kid some information that is true, that it is black or white, you know? And I was like, your father and I, are we rich? So let me answer this question for you. I feel rich. I feel healthy. I feel like I have, you know, a good life. I'm happy. All of that contributes to feeling rich. Money is just an aspect of what you consider to be rich. And it's a personal question. Like for me, what's important is family and relationships and health. And, obviously money is important. But I said, your dad and I work really hard. We have the life that we have because we make choices with our money. We choose to save and we choose to invest. And then the things that we buy, we don't buy everything. We buy the things that are most important to us. So I said, and I should have asked him, like, do you feel rich? What does rich mean to you? And I did ask him, what does rich mean to you? And that's when he was like, well, there's Elon Musk, and then there's like Scrooge McDuck, and then there's like homeless people, and then us, I guess. I was like, yeah, we're somewhere in the middle, but my God, what a middle. But I chose to just use that opportunity as a chance to just like give him some facts about like how we define rich as a family. That's what I want to protect. And it's less about getting into a conversation about wealth disparity or like keeping it really simple, because I was scared in that moment, like I'm going to mess this up. So then my response to that fear is I want to protect his understanding and his almost like the purity that he has around this right now by giving him very simple statements and very simple facts. And also like giving myself a break and knowing that I'm not going to like have the perfect answer, but as long as I speak from the truth, like in his, 9-year-old, like level, then I've done my job. And I think it's important to probe your kids, like if you're afraid, rather than like blah, give an answer. And then you're like, oh, I shouldn't have said like that, cleaning up your mess. Get them to talk, get them to answer questions. I think you'll learn a lot about actually what they're asking, which might be less scary. Cause he was just trying to figure out, I think like, are we okay? Like during the recession, I saw this a lot. I wrote for 17 magazine, which actually the reader is like 12, 17 magazine. So I was getting a lot of 12 and 13-year-olds writing in. I had a column and they're like, I just want to help. I don't know. My mom lost her job. Everything's stressful. Like, I just want to make sure we're okay. And I want to talk to them. And I think that kids deserve that honesty. And even if you're not okay, but knowing that you're working on it, like they want to feel like, that mom and dad or whoever was raising them is conscious and working on strategies.
I think that's so important, because a lot of times when kids ask something, they also just hear something randomly, and then their question might not be really what you think it is. It's based on what they heard from friends.
Oh yeah. I mean, I always say sometimes fear is like, it's like a bug that you catch from the external world. And so, whether it's FOMO or the fear of money or the fear of you fill in the blank, sometimes it's just like it arrives uninvited. It just like latches onto you.
I know we're up against time, but I have one last question before we say goodbye, and that's about financial advice for couples.
Yes, I see that.
Yeah, someone that's going to get married. Love to hear about the conversations, like the fear, I think, about combining assets. What do you tell people when they're getting married? And they also asked about renting and buying a house, or to stop renting and buying. But I think the bigger question there is about combining assets and becoming.
Yeah, I think it's important that before you get into the how to combine, where to combine, how many combinations, is that you first and foremost have really like lengthy conversations about your financial goals, how you were even raised around money. So what maybe your blind spots are, and also what your fears are and what your expectations are. I think like setting the emotional landscape is so important and foundational. The other stuff is just more technicalities. I used to be more firm and be like, everyone should have 3 accounts, yours, mine, and ours. And that's how we do it in our marriage. Like we have some joint accounts, some separate accounts, but why it works and why I think any system can work is that because ultimately we've agreed to a policy of transparency and communication. And the transparency piece can be figured out quite simply by using an app or a software that pulls all of your accounts together onto one dashboard, which, I can access on my phone, I can access on my laptop. So I don't need to ask my husband, did you pay your credit card bill, or what's in your 401k? Like, I can see all of that, and he can see all my stuff. And so that just, like, I think solves for a very sometimes sticky layer of discussion. Like, we don't want to feel like we're poking our heads in and asking and prying. And like, if one person's not as chatty about money as the other, like, technology can really do a service to your relationship. In the beginning of our marriage, we worked with a financial planner because I was afraid of being the one who was making all of the decisions, because I was the one who made more. And I think that's a role that you can de facto fall in, whatever your gender is, whoever makes more, I think ends up being the person perceived as the person who has all the answers, or is going to be naturally more inclined or interested in making all the financial decisions. And maybe even if that was true, it shouldn't be that way. It should be a more of a joint effort. So I wanted to protect that in my marriage, this like feeling of equality. And so to do that, I said, we have to work with a third person, who can kind of level the playing field for us and be a sounding board. And then that way, can be a wedge, a healthy wedge between us as we come up with a plan, because otherwise it can get messy. It can feel like one person's taking on more of a load than the other. And it was a great decision in the beginning of our marriage.
I love that. And we talk to clients about that all the time, even if it's one person who's just really like the go-to person for the money, we want to be having conversations with both people in the relationship, because you need to understand what's happening. You do need that transparency. And in the event that something happens, you want to be able to feel secure and know what assets you have and what to do.
Yeah,
So
it's so important.
It is. Well, Farnoosh, I know we're past our time, and I want to thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. Farnoosh's book is going to be coming out in October, so that's when everyone will be receiving a copy. And we are also here as a reminder to talk about your financial goals, your investments. So thank you again, and we look forward to seeing everyone soon. Thanks.
And one thing, I'll just put this link in the chat. Since you've all come to this webinar and you'll all be getting the book, I have a promotion on the website where if you just type in your name, email, and I asked for the receipt, but clearly you won't have it. So just like, I don't know, take a picture of your shoe and send it. Like, it's not going to disqualify you. I'll know. You will get an access to my free course, which is about financial fear, and it's called Scared Smart. It's really meant to be a short, sort of easy, like cheat sheet, how to on being smart with your financial fears. It comes with a workbook. There's, you get the intro to the book. So if you just want to get a head start, not wait till October, go to the website, type in your info, and it's in your inbox like as soon as you hit send.
That's great. And for our clients with younger children, I definitely recommend that for them as well, who are getting started with their careers and jobs and managing their money. So thank you, Farnoosh.
Thank you.